You don't start losing money in trading because you're ignorant. You start losing money the moment you become educated. That's the part nobody warns you about. In the beginning, when you knew almost nothing, you were reckless but free. You clicked buy and sell without hesitation. You didn't overthink. You didn't debate with yourself for 30 minutes before entering a trade. You didn't freeze because 3 indicators disagreed with each other. You saw something move, you reacted, and you accepted whatever happened next. Then you started learning. And slowly, quietly, almost invisibly, trading became harder instead of easier. At first, learning feels empowering. Every new concept feels like armor. You think knowledge will protect you from losses. You believe that once you understand market structure, liquidity, volume, fundamentals, macroeconomics, psychology, and risk management, losses will stop feeling random and profits will finally make sense. You tell yourself that beginners lose because they don't know enough. So if you just keep learning, you'll escape that fate. That belief feels logical. It feels responsible. It feels mature. And it's exactly where the trap starts. Because trading is one of the only professions where knowing more often makes execution worse. Not better. Worse. The more you learn, the more reasons you find not to act. The more you understand, the more potential outcomes you imagine. The more tools you have, the harder it becomes to decide which one to trust. A clean chart turns into a battlefield of opinions. One indicator says buy, another says wait. One mentor says trends are your friend. Another says markets are manipulated. One video says cut losses fast. Another says let trades breathe. And suddenly, the simple act of clicking a button feels heavy, dangerous, and emotional. You stop trading price and start trading ideas. You stop reacting and start predicting. And prediction is where traders die slowly. There's a moment every serious trader remembers. The moment when you realized you were no longer losing because of bad entries, but because you couldn't pull the trigger at all. You watched perfect setups pass by because you needed one more confirmation. You entered late because you hesitated. You exited early because a concept you learned whispered fear into your head. You broke your own rules because another strategy sounded smarter in the moment. You weren't trading anymore. You were thinking yourself into paralysis. This is the stage where traders feel broken. They know more than ever, yet perform worse than before. And instead of questioning whether learning itself has become the problem, they double down on it. More courses, more books, more videos, more indicators, more opinions. They treat confusion like ignorance, when in reality it's overload. Learning introduces ego into trading. When you don't know much, losses don't hurt your identity. You shrug and move on. But when you've studied for years, when you've invested time, money, and pride into becoming knowledgeable, every loss feels like an attack on your intelligence. You don't just lose money. You feel exposed. You feel stupid. You feel like all that learning should have protected you from this outcome. And that emotional reaction changes how you behave in the next trade. You hesitate because you don't want to be wrong again. You overmanage because you want to prove you're smart. You hold losers because cutting them feels like admitting failure. You add to positions because you understand why the market should turn. You start trading explanations instead of probabilities. And the market doesn't care how convincing your explanation is. It only cares about what price does next. The more you learn, the more attached you become to being right. And trading doesn't reward being right. It rewards being disciplined. It rewards accepting uncertainty. It rewards taking small losses without emotion and moving on like nothing happened. Knowledge makes that harder, not easier, because knowledge feeds the illusion that the market should behave logically. And markets are not logical. They are probabilistic, emotional, and often unfair in the short term. At some point, you realize you've turned trading into a mental competition. You're no longer trying to execute a simple edge. You're trying to outthink the market. You want to catch tops. You want to predict reversals. You want to prove you see what others don't. And that desire doesn't come from strategy. It comes from ego, fed by learning. The irony is painful. The more intelligent you are, the more dangerous this phase becomes. Smart people are especially vulnerable to overthinking. They can justify bad decisions with complex reasoning. They can explain losses away instead of correcting behavior. They can redesign systems endlessly instead of mastering one. Intelligence becomes a liability when it's not paired with restraint. There's a phase where your charts are beautiful, your language is sophisticated, and your results are terrible. You can explain why a trade failed in perfect detail, but you can't stop it from happening again. You're trapped in analysis mode, living in hindsight, narrating markets instead of trading them. And the market keeps taking money from you, quietly, consistently, without caring how well you understand what's happening. Eventually, something breaks. Maybe it's a drawdown. Maybe it's exhaustion. Maybe it's the realization that you've spent years learning and still don't trust yourself. And that's when the real lesson starts. Not the one you find in books or videos, but the one that feels like a loss of identity. You realize that trading was never about knowing more. It was about doing less, better. That realization hurts because it means most of what you chased wasn't necessary for execution. It means complexity didn't save you. It slowed you down. It distracted you. It made you emotional. And now you have to unlearn things, which is far harder than learning them in the first place. Unlearning feels like regression. It feels like throwing away progress. It feels irresponsible, almost lazy. You question whether simplifying means you're missing something important. You feel exposed without layers of confirmation. You feel uncomfortable trusting a small set of rules. And that discomfort is exactly why most traders never escape this phase. They would rather drown in complexity than sit with simplicity. Because simplicity forces accountability. When your system is simple, you can't hide behind excuses. When you lose, there's no one to blame but your execution. No indicator failed, no macro shift surprised you. You either followed your rules or you didn't. And that level of honesty is terrifying. At this stage, you start noticing something strange. Your best trades don't feel smart. They feel boring. They don't give you an adrenaline rush. They don't make you feel clever. They feel mechanical, repetitive, almost dull. And your ego hates that. Your ego wants drama. It wants complexity. It wants stories. But your account wants consistency. This is where trading stops feeling like learning and starts feeling like work. Real work. The kind that doesn't impress anyone. The kind that doesn't give you dopamine hits. The kind that requires patience, restraint, and the ability to do nothing most of the time. And for someone who's spent years learning, watching, studying, and thinking, doing nothing feels like failure. But doing nothing is often the most profitable action a trader can take. You start to understand that most losses don't come from bad setups. They come from unnecessary trades. Trades taken out of boredom, fear, excitement, or the need to justify all the knowledge you've accumulated. You feel pressure to use what you know. You feel like not trading is wasting your learning. And that pressure pushes you into low-quality decisions. The market doesn't reward effort. It doesn't reward intelligence. It doesn't reward curiosity. It rewards discipline. It rewards restraint. It rewards consistency. And none of those qualities improve by learning more. They improve by practicing less but better. At some point, you stop asking, "What else can I learn?" and start asking, "What can I remove?" What concepts are making me hesitate? What information is making me emotional? What tools are giving me excuses instead of clarity? And slowly, painfully, you begin stripping things away. You stop watching most trading content. You stop chasing new strategies. You stop listening to people who sound confident but don't trade your account. You narrow your focus until there's almost nothing left. One market, one setup, one risk rule, one execution process. And that feels terrifying because now there's nowhere to hide. This is where most people quit because this phase is lonely. There's no excitement, no sense of discovery, no illusion of progress, just repetition. Losses that still happen, wins that don't feel special, and the constant temptation to go back to learning, back to complexity, back to feeling productive instead of disciplined. But if you stay here long enough, something shifts. Your mind quiets. You stop narrating every tick. You stop arguing with price. You stop trying to be right. You start responding instead of predicting. Losses stop hurting as much because they're expected. Wins stop exciting you because they're just part of the process. And for the first time, trading feels calm. That calm is dangerous to your ego, but healthy for your account. You realize that knowledge was never the enemy. Attachment to knowledge was. The need to use everything you learned was. The belief that more understanding equals more profit was. Knowledge is only useful when it serves execution, not when it complicates it. The best traders aren't the ones who know the most. They're the ones who have learned what to ignore. They've seen enough to recognize patterns, but not so much that they argue with them. They've learned enough to build trust in a simple process, then stopped learning altogether. Not because they're done growing, but because growth now comes from discipline, not information. And this is the final, uncomfortable truth. If the more you learn, the worse you trade, it doesn't mean you're failing. It means you're standing at the edge of the hardest transition in trading. The transition from intellectual curiosity to professional execution. From complexity to simplicity. From ego to process. Most people never make that transition. They stay stuck forever, learning, thinking, explaining, losing. A small group accepts that trading is not about becoming smarter. It's about becoming calmer, more restrained, and more boring than your instincts want you to be. And the moment you accept that, trading stops punishing you for what you know and starts rewarding you for what you do, not more, just better.